Good afternoon, LEC community. Thank you for joining us for today's Ask an Educator edition of Ask an Educator. My name is Susana Elizarraz, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Latinx Education Collaborative. We are a nonprofit working to increase Latinx educators in K through 12 classrooms. And of course, up under that work is obviously retention, supporting, loving, affirming, appreciating, recognizing Latinx educators who are already doing amazing work. Ask an Educator is one way for us to do that. I'm so excited for us to have our guest today who is joining us from away from me physically, city-wise. It's so cool what the virtual space has given us the opportunity to be able to do. So I am here to introduce you to Lee Perez from Nebraska, the 2022 Nebraska Teacher of the Year, right, Lee?
Yes. Yes.
Lee, how's it going?
I'm doing good. I'm on summer break. My wife is actually at 12 months, so I'm actually staying home with my 1-year-old daughter. Nice. And so far, it's been an amazing experience. I get to spend some daddy-daughter time with her, and it's going good. She can say mama. She can say papa. She's got 4 teeth on top, 4 on bottom. So hashtag dad life, hashtag girl dad. In addition to state teacher of the year, yeah.
I love it. And I love, all the achievements, right, that some people would consider small, but like as a parent, I also have a little one too. He's 2.5. It's like the 4 teeth is a big thing, right? Like the teeth, and then the like crawling and the rolling and the head up and everything. I mean,
yes,
what a
we
cool
just had
time.
her. We just had her birthday party. She just turned 1 on June 3rd. It was a lot of fun. So in 14 years, it'll be the quinceañera.
Yeah.
So that'll come.
Yes.
That'll come quicker than we realized. But yeah, it's just being a parent's just been a blessing, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's great.
It's really cool. You let us know when you need padrinos lined up, or I hope you've started to save. I hope you started to save because
that process has already started. Yes, absolutely.
Love it. Well, thanks again for being with us today. I would love if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, who are your people, and what do you do?
Right. And before I begin, I just want to say that I'm speaking as the 2022 Nebraska Teacher of the Year and the 2023 Horace Mann Awardee. My stories, testimony, and opinions are my own and are not representative of any specific organization. So to begin, my name is Lee Perez. I was born in North Platte, Nebraska. I have 5 brothers. I identify as Latino. My pronouns are he, his, and him. And I have been an educator for 16 years now. And in addition to that, with my most recent recognitions, I was the first Latinx male person of color in Nebraska's history to win, and ESL teacher to win Nebraska Teacher of the Year. In addition to that, I was the first person in Nebraska to be a Horace Mann Awardee. So I made history in both of those aspects. But I will tell you, my road to success has been quite a rocky one, and we'll kind of dive into that conversation later. I just want to let you know that my past, lots of skeletons, but fully transparent with it, specifically with the aspects of, trauma and substance abuse. But I think that that's really, really important, specifically for marginalized communities and students of color to hear, because when they see individuals like me or us be successful, they realize that some of the obstacles they face, they can clearly overcome just like I did.
Yeah, no, when I met you a few weeks ago, you told me a little bit of your story. We talked about how important it is to share that story, right? Because there are lots of us who live on the margins of what society considers to be typical or normal or acceptable. Right. And the more that our students and our youth hear that, these struggles can happen and these difficult decisions made can happen, and still you can come out on the other side, and have a happy, fulfilling, thriving life, right? And so I absolutely welcome whatever piece of your story, you come with us with today. So you were born in Nebraska. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I was born in Nebraska. So an interesting story. So I'm biracial. So my mom is European. She's German, Irish, and Scottish. So I can actually claim Irish on St. Patrick's Day. I know
Love
lots of
it.
people do, and they're not. And
Yeah.
my dad is from Mexico. And so basically, they immigrated to this country, like many stories you hear. And they basically were seeking a better life. And they were migrant field workers. They settled in San Marcos, Texas in the 1950s. Lots of people forget that Hispanics and Latinos and Mexicans dealt with a lot of racial discrimination in addition to the civil rights movement with African Americans. And unfortunately, my father was a product of what is called language loss. Anthropologists call it language extinction. So he did know Spanish. Spanish was his first language. But just due to the sheer intolerance during that time, for example, whenever he went to class, if you were caught speaking Spanish, they would hit you on the hand. They would literally just kind of use all these very punitive measures against children that were speaking Spanish. So as a result of that, he lost the ability to speak that language. So then they continued to migrate north. They settled in Wellington, Texas, where they continued to do migrant field work, the very backbreaking work from sunup to sundown. And then eventually they continued north to North Platte, Nebraska, where my father eventually settled and met my mom. And then the rest is history. So they got married, and that's where they decided to start a family. It was North Platte, Nebraska.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm really glad you mentioned all of that because I think in our conversation it came up a little bit, but we have teachers who will come and be like, I don't know if I can be part of the LEC because I don't speak Spanish, or I don't know if I can be part of the LEC because my parents are actually first generation, I'm second
Right.
or third, right? And it's funny how people within our own community have gatekeeped what
Yeah.
it means to be Latino, right?
Yeah.
And one of the big things has been language, right? I think in some instances, in some places of the country, right, you're made to feel like because of that language lost, you're maybe less Latino.
Right.
Has that come up for you at all? Because
Yeah.
I
Oh,
know,
for sure. But the thing
yeah,
is especially with predominantly prominent Spanish surname like Perez, yeah, it comes up all the time. But then when I tell them my story, it provides a little bit more context,
mm-hmm.
because I think honestly, if my father would have stayed in Texas, things would have obviously been a little different. But that's why, I'm learning Spanish now and I know it for the most part. But the thing is like, that's one of the reasons why I don't know it. It's because he grew up in a time where that was not linguistically and culturally accepted. And
Acceptable, yeah.
it is a story that I tell because lots of my kids come to this country. And yes, I'm an ESL teacher. I want them to learn English. That's my job and that's my objective as an ESL teacher. But I also don't want them to lose their identity, specifically their cultural identity, because language and culture are very much a inclusive phenomenon. And
Yeah.
I always tell my students that story, and I always tell teachers of color that story, because I don't want them to feel this kind of isolation, like like you're less Latino because you didn't know Spanish. But then when you hear the history of why, people are like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now I can kind of see where you're coming from, and it
Yeah.
creates more of a context in that situation. But yeah, Autumn Rivera, is kind of in the same situation, and she can kind of tell you that, because we've had these conversations before, and it's just kind of disheartening, because it's like you almost wish those of us would support you with maybe some type of empathy. But it's hard not to understand something, because the thing is like I would never want anybody to go through what I went through, and specifically what my father's side of the family went through. I would never
Right.
want anybody to go through that, and it is kind of disheartening to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're right in that we don't hear enough about it, right? In school we definitely don't learn about you called it did you call it language extinction?
Yeah, language loss, and
Yeah.
anthropologists call it that very academic term, language extinction.
Yeah.
It's a lot of what the indigenous people went through in this country, and even in Latin America too.
Yes. And that's such a prominent thing around the world, right? Not just in Latino America, not just here in the United States, but around the world, of language, and the erasure of language on forcefully, right?
Yeah.
Forcibly, it has been a tool, for forever, right?
Oh
And
yeah, and
all around the world. So
that's where you get into like you have these initiatives where you want kids to fully assimilate. And I always tell people I'm not really in agreement with assimilation. I'm more with the mindset of acculturation, and people will always ask me, well, specifically when I was going around and speaking as Nebraska Teacher of the Year, since an ESL teacher had never had the message that I had, specifically with marginalized community, kids of color, people of color, and, language and how language works, people would always ask me, specifically like student teachers, what is the difference between assimilation and acculturation? I basically said assimilation is you want it one way or else, because historically that's how it is. I mean, when colonizers wanted full assimilation, they got it. And sometimes they got it by coercive means, whereas acculturation is kind of, I explain, like the best of both worlds. Like you can be proud to be, for example, a citizen of the United States of America, but you can also not forget where you came from. And a lot of that is language. And so I'm with the notion and ideology of acculturation because it's more culturally tolerant, it's more culturally receptive and responsive to our students, and it's equitable.
It's interesting. We kind of went down this road. We didn't plan this at all. And you are an ESL teacher. I just put that two and two together where like language does very much permeate your day-to-day work too. So it's interesting. We kind of went down this road. Well, tell us, kind of take us a little deeper into what you would consider part of your leadership story. So something in your upbringing, your journey as a student or a professional that has kind of led you to where you are today.
Right. So when I won Teacher of the Year, I was sitting there trying to think, okay, like what message am I going to craft that I'm going to bring to this, in the local, state, and national level? Like who am I going to present myself as far as like my identity? And I decided to go with my past. And I decided, and I know sometimes it sounds counterproductive and people always ask me why I do this, but I decided to talk about my failures before my successes, or in other words, how my failures led to my successes. So for example, like I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've spent some time in jail for alcohol related offenses. I've literally hit rock bottom. Like I barely graduated high school. I had like a D-, GPA when my senior year back in 2000. I can't believe that's been 23 years ago. When I went in and took my ACT, I just marked bubbles, didn't care, went to class, put my hood up, slept. My dad wasn't in my life for a good portion of my life. He was a pipe fitter in the South. So for 12 years, it was me and my 5 brothers, and my mom was raising 6 boys on her own, and she couldn't keep an eye on all of us. And so I started to hang with the wrong crowd, and I started to do things that probably I shouldn't have been doing. And a lot of that was, drinking, and I got into some trouble. And so when I go around and I speak, I always put up like my list of my offenses and all the stuff that I just told you. And people are just kind of stunned by that. But I think the reason why I do it is because it gives people hope. It's like, okay, so Lee's done all these amazing things the last 4 or 5 years in his teaching career. And I've been blessed with so many accolades and recognitions and awards. But the thing is it never used to be that way. I mean, literally, I was in jail for 2 days. I mean, you don't get any rock bottom than that. But another piece of that story is like, there was always some teachers that were really like very beneficial in my life. And they just kind of stuck by me. One of them was a Latinx teacher, and one of them was my basketball coach. But I will say that I remember when I was in jail, and when you're in jail, you can only read so much, and you just kind of have a lot of time to think about everything that you've done in your life. And I remember one of these teachers called me when I was in jail, and he said, and I'll never forget what he said to me, because normally it was like, when I talked to him, he would lecture me, or he would try to give me advice, or both, or it would always just be like, okay, he's calling to try to like tell me, hey, you shouldn't do this because of XYZ. But no, and I'll never forget what he said to me. He didn't do any of that. He called me.
Were you in high school at the time? So you were his student at the time when he called you?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't, I think this was like a year after I graduated high school.
Okay.
But I mean, I still was very involved with him and stuff like that. But I mean, in high school, I still got into a lot of trouble. But yeah, I think this was a year after I graduated. I mean, some of this stuff happened like 3 decades ago. I'd have to really think about it. But
yeah.
I just remember when he called me, he said something to me that I'll never forget. And he called me and he said, Lee, I want you to name one productive thing that alcohol has done for your life. And then he just hung up on me. There was no speech. There was no advice. There was no, you're better than this. You know, there was no like motivational talk. It was just, he said that and hung up. Wow. And so I remember thinking, wow, like he's never done that. So what does that mean? And I remember sitting there, okay, I'm in jail, I'm drunk. And he said that to me. And it was almost like I kind of had this like epiphany. And I was like, he's right. Look at me. Like, what am I doing? So like when I got out, it took a while, but I started to take small steps towards recovery. And I started to make little changes. And I started to get my act together. I started to go back to school. I enrolled in a community college, started to get my grades, you know, up to par. And my life just really changed. But it just shows the power of words because, I mean, I still remember that phone call and him saying that like it was yesterday because it was just such a powerful statement. And it was just a powerful one-sentence statement. So when I go around and speak, I talk about all my failures, but more importantly, how I got to the successes that I am, but how teachers got me there.
It's interesting. The level of investment that has to be there for someone to even make that phone call to you, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we don't appreciate enough about teachers is how invested a lot of us truly are in the lives and trajectories of our kiddos, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He absolutely didn't have to make that call.
No.
He absolutely didn't have to care what happened to you after graduation or outside of his four walls of his classroom, right? But for him, and I'm sure there's like some emotional toll for him, right? And some kind of emotional investment, psychological investment, spiritual investment to make that phone call. And like there's conversations he had to have had to let up to, right? Like that level of investment in you to have made that phone call, that doesn't come up in a job description.
No,
you know, that's not. No. So like that speaks volumes, like you said, to the impact that teachers can have on their students, you know?
Yeah, just a one-liner. And that literally just changed everything. Wow. And then like Mr. Cisneros, who was one of my Latinx teachers, he was, and I talk about both these teachers pretty much every time I speak. And I talk about my story all the time every time I speak. And people are just shocked because a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, he's specifically with Nebraska Teacher of the Year and the Horace Mann recognition, like you wouldn't think twice of, oh, that's what he went through. But it is. It has been a rocky road. But the thing is like one time a student teacher asked me, they're like, you know, Mr. Perez, do you regret your past? Like, do you regret your life? And I always answer that question by saying, no, I don't regret my life because that's what made me and molded me into who I am today. You know, the mistakes of my past are what truly defined who I am today. Because if you're not making mistakes, how can you learn from them? And I look back at my life all the time and I'm like, wow, even though I might have thought about changing things, no, I wouldn't change my life because that's who I was and that's who I am. But the important thing is now I'm telling my story to the next generation. So hopefully that they don't make the same mistakes that I made. And that's part of teaching is it's not consistently teaching in a classroom. You're teaching students life skills and how to work through the difficulties of society and things like that, specifically people of color with all the challenges and barriers that we face.
Yeah, no. And that again, that's not going to come up on a job description, right? You don't really officially sign up for that. But those of us who, you know, want to do great things by the youth that we impact, we do take it that step further and know that, like you said, words matter, right? And for us to have another level of investment really makes a difference for our students. When we were preparing for this interview, you and I, you talked about your story and you said, you know, can I share it? You know, and I was like, absolutely, because we, especially the a stereotype, I think, around teachers too, is that we're prim and proper and we're perfect, and not that you are not, but that we have like this very linear experience to what teaching is and what it become, and like how you got there. You went to college and you went to, right, and for students who live in circumstances or in situations where that doesn't align with maybe the life around them, for them to see, no, my teacher had a similar upbringing than I did, and here they are, right? They're my classroom teacher. I definitely think that there's a stereotype around teachers, right? That we kind of got it all together, and we always have had it all together. So for kiddos and for youth to hear, hey, no, we've gone through some stuff too, and we've made some mistakes, and we're on the other side of it.
Yeah, and that's my message, and I'm glad I'm telling it. And I'm still being booked to speak. I got a few back to school gigs in the next couple months. Actually, I'm going back to North Platte on August 4th, the school district that proudly produced me, and I'm going to be giving the same speech and talking about pretty much how I got here and the rocky start that I had in my life and all the hurdles that I had to jump through. But yeah, I mean, it's super important. And I just kind of want to add to that, specifically after COVID, when you have lots of, this message is not just tailored towards students, which it is, because I have a very big student first philosophy. It's important to adults too.
Yeah.
Very important to adults. And because one time I was speaking at a local university, and, I always respect people's privacy, so I'm not going to name the university, but I was speaking at a university, and there was this student there, and I was telling my story, and I was going over everything I just told you and my struggles and everything. And I could tell she was getting emotional. And at the end of my speech, she said, I don't know if this is what you do, but I wanted to give up tonight. I've been going through a lot. I didn't want to come to class, and I just wanted to call it quits. But after hearing you speak, I've changed my mind. And I remember I gave her a hug and I said, listen, I am in no position to throw stones at anybody. Look at my past. It's not like you said, it's that stereotypical thing with teachers where people want to believe we have the perfect lives. We don't. Specifically, I don't. And I'm proud to tell people that I don't. But I basically told her, don't give up, because I mean, everything I've gone through in my life, trust me, you can make it through it. You definitely can make it through it. And she decided to stay in the program, the teacher education program at this anonymous university. And I'm very proud that my story and my words were able to inspire, empower, and persuade her to stay. Because hearing that, she basically said, I thought my life was bad and I thought I was going through a rough time, but after hearing your story, not even close. And she goes, I can do it. I go, yes, you can. You absolutely can do it.
Wow. Wow. I mean, literally life changing, right?
Yeah.
It just from telling your story and telling the truth, right? The truth of your experience. It's inspiring. It is, because to have people to be able to relate to you, like, it sounds like her story may have even been a little bit different, and still for it to be like, okay, no, I got this, right? You're right. That's definitely not just for kids or youth. That's for adults too. We struggle too. We hit points of contention too, where we're hearing a story that can push us to the next level, right, or to the other side of things, can really come at the right time. I'm going to shout out Dr. Clark, who's with us. I know Dr. Clark's a big Huskers fan. Lee, are you a Huskers fan?
No, I'm a Miami fan. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Dr. Clark. I tried. He says Nebraska representing. Nebraska, I think, has the same stigma as Missouri, as like lowland cows and stuff. But
Corn, flat, yep.
Yeah, and it is for a lot of percentage of it, but I know that there are pockets of a lot of diversity and a lot of different things, different languages spoken, and pockets of immigrants and farm workers and things. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why I mentioned that, but Nebraska just, has its stereotypes too. Um, of course, this next question you've give us some insight to, but my next question is, what hurdles have happened in your career that have made your dream of teaching a little more difficult?
Yeah, and again, it was kind of my past. And again, the crazy thing is like growing up, I didn't really see a value in education. Like I honestly almost dropped out of high school, like because I just didn't see a purpose in it. I just thought school was, quite frankly, a waste of time. And I had lots of these unproductive people that I hung out with, that I used to hang out with and drink with and stuff like that. And they ended up dropping out. And I don't know why I didn't drop out, but I do know why. I had some amazing teachers, but that was probably the biggest hurdle, is just like going through my life without my dad in my life for 12 years. And I don't really necessarily blame my father. He had to work and he had to be gone all the time, but that was really, really hard. And my father passed away in 2015, but he eventually came back into my life and we became really close. But during that time when I was in middle school, transitioning to high school, going to college, like I really, really wish I would have had my dad in my life. And I know that my brothers kind of feel the same way, but that was probably one of the biggest hurdles, is just not, and I don't, my mom, just an amazing woman. She did what she could, but raising 6 boys, I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have been like. But that was probably, in addition to everything I went through, probably one of the biggest hurdles, is just not having my dad in my life to kind of give me the advice and to kind of give me the guidance that I needed. Because, and again, everything happens for a reason. And so, I mean, but yeah, that was probably a huge hurdle right there. But
yeah. I mean, that though very much mirrors the experience of a lot of our students, right? And
single family households,
single family households. Has that come up, in your journey as a teacher, where you've been able to kind of lend that shoulder for kiddos who are like, yo, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Yep.
Like,
yes.
I mean, I have a single mom or a single dad or a single parent, and right, like that totally has had to come up. So what has that been like?
It's empathy. It's total empathy. And this is why I advocate for more teachers of color, because I know that teachers of color get what a lot of these struggles are like. And that is probably one of my biggest objectives when I was state teacher of the year. But I know my year of service is over, but it's still what I'm advocating for, pushing for moving forward, is, because it's that empathy piece. Because if you can empathize with kids, then that is probably the biggest thing. And I want to leave people with a quote, and this is kind of a quote I use and stuff like that. Don't be good at teaching, be a good teacher. Because if you're a good teacher, you're going to be naturally good at teaching. So I'm going to say that again. Don't be good at teaching, but be a good teacher. And that's kind of the philosophy that I take, is like a student first, curriculum, academic second approach. Because, at the end of the day, these kids are human beings. They have feelings, they have emotions. Many of them have hidden trauma or absent narrative stories that we don't know. And, that empathy piece is big. So, when kids say, hey, I'm going through this, or, I don't have a dad. And, and even then, like even adults, even when I've spoken as state teacher of the year, I've had people come up to me and say, yeah, I didn't have my dad in my life. And I know what you're going through. And it's hard. Yeah. And again, stories resonate, because when individuals hear a story, whether it's students or adults or whoever, you're always looking for pieces of empathy that you can fit into your life and say, okay, how is my story similar to this individual? And that's part of a story, is you're trying to make connections of how things are not necessarily different, but how are they similar? And that's why I tell my story, because I want individuals to see, hey, this is what I've gone through. I know what you're going through. Things will get better, but here are some ways that I can support you and others can support you.
Yeah. I wonder how, so I'm not gonna lie, as I'm listening to you talk, and like how much influence, you have in ways out, like that's a great quote. Like don't necessarily just be good at teaching, but be a good teacher.
Yeah.
How I think when I was teaching, being a good teacher meant so much outside of my job description, on top of my job description, that I think kind of led to my burnout. So I burnt out after 6 years. There's a lot of stories up under that, right, and everything. What would you say to maybe in me in my 6th year, when I was like, I can't continue to be a good teacher, and it involves so much outside of my job description, being that like loving my kiddos and caring for my kiddos and going to their soccer games and having snacks in my room and making sure there were hoodies in the corner just in case kiddos got cold, right? Like these things that you do that are above and beyond. What would you have said to me in that 6th year to be like, we got to keep it going, right? Or like, what would you say to teachers who are feeling kind of burnt out from being a good teacher and not just good at teaching?
Oh, and that's a good question. I've been asked that question all the time. And the answer, it's not simple, but my answer is you have to learn how to say no to things. And I know that's hard, but if you're not okay mentally and physically within your own self, how are you supposed to take care of others? So I get it. Your first couple of years, you want to say yes to everything. You want to be a fierce advocate. You want to do all this stuff for kiddos. You want to be at everything. You want to be present. You want to just be that incredible teacher in their life. But the thing is if you're a good teacher, and again, don't be good at teaching, be a good teacher. So if you're a good teacher, yeah, you're going to have kiddos invite you to things. But the thing is, you have to learn how to protect yourself and your mental health, and then you can focus on others. And I always tell people, you don't have to say no to everything, but you have to understand there's got to be a balance. And oftentimes when we go into the field, we want to go running head first. And that's how, because that's how burnout is. And I've learned how to professionally say no. And I've been strategic about my advocacy and my community involvement and when I need to be present and things like that. And it has done wonders for me because I'm not so fatigued as I was my first, 3 to 5 years. And typically new teachers that I talk to all the time tell me some of the same stories that you just elaborated on, where it's like, I want to say yes to everything. And even when I talk to pre-clinical and student teachers and education majors, they'll tell me the same thing. I want to say yes to everything. And I said, you can't, because that's how you burn yourself out. And I always explain teaching is not a sprint. It's a marathon. You have to, I'm a former distance runner, so I'm going to use like cross country.
Yeah.
So you got to pace yourself, but you have to learn how to say no. You just do. You have to learn how to protect your mental health, and you have to learn how to take care of yourself, and you have to, more importantly, self-care. And having a daughter has taught me that is very, very important, because now I have a little one to raise. Mm-hmm. So that's the advice I would give you, is just learn how to say no, but also learn how to say yes in the right circumstances. And again, I know exactly what you mean, because I did a lot of the same things, and I quickly got burnt out because I wanted to be everywhere. But the thing is like, there wasn't 100 Lee Perez's, so I couldn't be everywhere, and that's how burnout happens. So.
Yeah, no, that's some really great advice. And hearing it from you, it almost seems obvious, right? Yeah. But like, it really is more difficult in practice, because I never said no, right? Like
right.
Kids' birthday parties, the soccer games, right?
Quinceañeras, all that stuff. Yeah. Graduations. Everything. Yeah. Baptisms, first
baby showers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Weddings.
All the things. Yes. Yes. And then even more on top of that, right? I remember doing weekend shopping trips with my husband, and like, oh man, I gotta grab snacks for the kids, and I got it right, like absolutely everything. And now that I'm a mom, I definitely tell myself, like, I don't think I could have been a mom and taught at the same time, because of the level of investment you need to have in this little one now, right? But that's great advice. Like, as obvious as it sounds, seriously, it's great advice, right?
Learning. Well, let me give you another example. When I was State Teacher of the Year, I gave around 84 speeches in my year of service.
Oh my gosh.
Truthfully, I could have given a lot more, but I had to say no to a lot of it because I was teaching full time. I didn't get sabbatical, unfortunately. Lots of my state teachers of the year colleagues did, and I was so envious of that because I wish I could have had a year of sabbatical to just perform these duties. But I was teaching full time. I had a personal life, so teaching full time, personal life, and then going around and giving all these speeches. And sometimes I was given 10 speeches a week. And speaker's fatigue is a real thing, and public speaking is exhausting. And whenever
Absolutely.
I gave keynotes or professional developments or just simple speeches to, introduction to education classes or introduction to ESL.
And you were traveling, right? Like you're traveling around the nation.
Yeah, I actually leased my car and I went over my lease limit by at least 25,000 miles because I was constantly all over the state. But the thing is like I had to say no for my mental health because, again, when I was state teacher of the year, I was like, okay, I want to accomplish all this. I want to advocate for this. I really want to push for this legislation. I really want to speak on my past. I really want to just push the benefits of the teaching profession with all the negativity that's going around, with just all the polarization of topics that shouldn't be polarized. And I just hit it running. And I just quickly realized that public speaking is exhausting. And I said to myself, okay, I have to learn how to say no. And there were lots of speaking engagements that I did turn down. And when I spoke, one of the questions that was always asked me, I'd say at least 98% of the time, is what piece of advice can you give us going into the education field? And I always said, you have to take time for yourself. You have to take time for yourself, because if you don't, that's how burnout leads. And when you look at teacher retention data, even pre-COVID, I mean, the average was 3 to 5 years, and then people were out of the profession. Well, one of the reasons, there are a plethora of reasons for that, but one of the reasons for that was simply individuals were saying yes to everything, and that was leading to burnout.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think one of the top 3 is stress, like literally just stress.
Exactly. It literally creates unadded stress. And so, for example, if I was asked to speak here and then they wanted me to speak there were times I had to say, I've already committed to this university, or I've already committed to this organization, or I've already booked this nonprofit. My apologies. However, but I would always offer, and I always give this piece of advice, when you say no, always offer an alternative solution. No, I can't coach this right now, but maybe sometime in the next couple of years when I'm not doing graduate school, or when my daughter's a little older, or when, I always tell new teachers, when I get this teaching thing figured out, it's kind of like when I get lesson planning figured out, grading figured out, professional development figured out, just classroom management, and the thing is, always, when you say no, always provide an alternative. Yeah.
That's a really good point. And there's your no, for those of us who are, good teachers, your no is going to be a legitimate reason, right? Like, hey, how about, you have 8 soccer games this semester, I can go to 1 or 2, right? Yeah. And so it's like, because these other days I have XYZ, right? I need to take care of myself. I need to take care of my home. Yeah, I was definitely notorious for every weekend and every everything, which is really good advice. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
My next question is, despite the hurdles from your earlier life, what it took to get through school, I mean, high school, college, right? Supporting your, being there for your mom and for your family, and to now, right, coming off of your year of Teacher of the Year, what keeps you going through all of that?
Well, my daughter now, having a child definitely changes your worldview, so she keeps me going. But an interesting note on that, just with Teacher of the Year and Horace Mann, I was also the first person in my family to get a college degree. Currently, I'm doing my master's in TESOL, which is an acronym for teaching English to speakers of other languages. And in 11 weeks, I'll be the first person in my family on either my mother's and father's side to have a master's degree, which breaks several.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So, that is something that keeps me going, because it's something that I can tell marginalized communities, kids of color, people of color, hey, in addition to all the struggles I went through, this is my motivation. This is what keeps me going. I want to get this college degree because I want to be a fantastic teacher and I want to change the lives of students, and I want to share my story of struggle to show them that whatever struggles and trauma they're going through internally, that things will be okay. And in addition to that, show them the value of an education and say, hey, even though I had to work several jobs and I had to pay for my education on my own, this is how I was able to do that. And again, that is just the power of a story. That is just the power of, hey, this is what I went through. And if I can do it, you can do it. And it's powerful because, when kids and teachers of color see others that look like this, they see the phenotypical features, they see the skin color, they see the language, they see the cultural attributes. It's empowering. They say, hey, Lee can do it, I can do it. And that's great. Autumn Rivera can do it, we can do it.
I mean, it's the epitome of representation matters, right?
Exactly.
It's me being able to see myself in you in one way or another, and then be able to see success in you too. I'm like, okay, I can get there too, right? I don't think it's appreciated enough, right? For sure. You remember the teachers that you related to, even if it were a different race or ethnicity, but that thing that attracted you to their identity because it's like, oh, they're like me, right? And that means I can make it too.
Well, let me give you an example. Like Mr. Cisneros, who was my only Latinx teacher in high school 23 years ago. It was back when social studies was called civics. So I had him for civics. But I mean, again, I hated school. I didn't want to go to school. At one point, my senior year, I was like truant almost a month. I mean, I just wasn't going to school. But when I didn't go to school, the one class I did enjoy going to was Mr. C's class, Mr. Cisneros, because he looked like me. So I love Mr. Cisneros. And I remember when I graduated, and I barely graduated, but he helped me get there. When I graduated, he eventually retired and he went to work. He didn't want to be just one of those retirees that wanted to go golf all day. He told me that. He goes, Lee, I want to make a little money. And so he went and worked at JCPenney's at the North Platte Mall. And coincidentally, JCPenney's was right across the street from my house. Literally, it was a 2-minute walk. And on the weekends, when I didn't have to, I used to walk across the street and I used to go see him. My old teacher, kid that hated school, at-risk student, recovering alcoholic, been arrested, been in jail, wrote off as a loser, barely graduated high school, didn't take any of his education seriously, saw no rationale or no prominent reason why it was important whatsoever, would go talk to a teacher.
Yeah,
why would I do that?
Again, just to talk to him.
Teacher. And I would just go talk to him about everything because he was inspiring to me. And one of the reasons why I went into the education field was him, because I was like, if he can be a teacher, I can be a teacher. And I remember one time we were talking at JCPenney's and he said, Lee, you should try education. And I remember I laughed so hard. This was before the LOL became a thing. This was 23 years ago. I laughed so hard. And I said, Mr. C, I don't like school. And he used to say to me, well, if you don't like school, why do you come talk to me? I'm a teacher. I go, because you're different, man. You're different than all the other teachers. But what I meant by that, you're different in you look like me, you talk like me, you act like me. And that's the point of all this. And God, I haven't talked to him. I'm going to say, if Mr. Cisneros, if you are out there, thank you for all those chats. Thank you for talking to me. You didn't have to, but I appreciate your words of wisdom. I mean, just an amazing human being. But again, kind of on that quote, don't be good at teaching, be a good teacher. And he was a really good teacher.
That almost makes me emotional a little bit, right? Yeah. So Mr. Cisneros, if you're out there, thank you for your commitment to your students. Just because you and I know what it takes to be a good teacher, and for someone to do it for a significant amount of time. Thank you, Lee, for the amount of time you've done the work that you do. It's obviously showing with your nominations and the awards and all of that. And it's so important, like we've mentioned, for people who can relate to you on several levels, right? We haven't mentioned that you're also a male teacher, right? And I mean, like, that's also out of the ordinary for our field, right? And so for boys and male identifying folks to also see themselves in you is a whole nother, right? Like all of these intersectionalities of identity really do make a difference for students, and not just for students, like you said, for people.
Yeah.
I have my son sitting here.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Come here. You want to come see?
Hi.
Yeah, Ben. Say hi.
Hi. Hi, Val. How are you?
Say hi. Yeah, he's ready for mama's attention. But no, I'm so excited that we got to chat.
Yeah. And thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me tell my story.
Of course.
You know, like I said, if educators, if you're out there, if you want me to come tell this story to your districts, to your kids, to your teachers, I'm being booked already, getting pretty busy. I will email you my website. I will email you my Twitter. So please spread the message. I would love to come tell this story. Again, it's something I'm transparent about. It's something I talk about all the time. But again, it is the power of a story, and it is the power of words, and it is the power of, I always call myself the Robert Downey Jr. of education, because if you look at Robert Downey Jr., he went through some of the same struggles I went through: substance abuse, alcoholism, jail, and now he's Iron Man. So in some of my speeches, I say, I am Iron Man. It's also a parallel to Marvel because I'm a huge Marvel fan. So yeah, I mean, it's just been an honor to serve the state of Nebraska as Nebraska Teacher of the Year. It has been an honor to serve the state of Nebraska as a Horace Mann Awardee. I am not done. I'm going to continue to work. I'm going to continue advocating for the most marginalized communities, because oftentimes they need that voice in a world that wants to keep them voiceless. And I will not stop, because there's lots of work to be done. And it has been an honor and privilege to serve in that role.
Lee, I so totally appreciate, first of all, you being willing to tell your story and the service that you have done, not just in Nebraska, but in your teaching, in your classrooms. My last question, as these little fingers pop back up.
Eventually, is he walking now? Because
he is. He needs some support. He has some struggles with his vision, but he is definitely all around the place. Yes.
Yeah. See, eventually, when I'm doing these, you're going to see my little daughter's finger. Yep.
Your daughter is gonna. Yep. The fingers will spring up.
Yes.
Into the screen. Yes. My last question, just to kind of give us something to walk away with. If you had one thing that you want all of your students to walk away from your classroom knowing, what is that one thing?
That I am in it for them, and always in it for them. And let me give you an example like that. I am your teacher for life, like forever. Like, you're never getting rid of me, because part of being a good teacher is taking everything you've taught kids and transcending that outside of the walls of your classroom. And let me give you a specific example of that. This last week was my daughter's first birthday party, and several of my former students were there at her birthday. And many of them have families of their own. They have children and they have jobs. They're doing just amazing things in their life. Some of them came to my wedding when I got married in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. But I just want you to know,
cool.
I am your teacher and your advocate for life. And if you ever need anything, I am here for you. I still write recommendations all the time. I still am listed for references. I still have jobs contacting me, asking me about the amazing things that my students are going to be doing with their future endeavors. And it's just been an honor. But one of the conversations I had with one of my former students is, I just remember telling her, I hope that I've taught you not only the stuff that you needed to succeed in school, but I hope that I have taught you the skills that you've needed to learn in life just to be a good human being. And she looked at me and she said, you absolutely have done that. And she said, you've continued to do that to this day. So yeah, we kind of had a moment, a little bit emotional, a little bit of tears, but that is the thing I want all students to know, is that I am your champion, your advocate, your teacher, your hero for life, forever. You're never getting rid of me. So
I love that. A lifelong teacher. I love that. I love that. Well, Lee, like I said, thank you so much for being with us. Congratulations again
Yes.
on Nebraska Teacher of the Year, on the Horace Mann Awardee. We are so grateful to have you in classrooms and committed to students. I mean, hopefully one day I'll be up in Nebraska or something, and I'd be happy
Yes.
to come visit your classroom.
Yes, absolutely. That would be great. And I'll hit you up next time I'm in Kansas City. We love going to Kansas City all the time. As a matter of fact, the last time I was there was last year. I spoke at a TESOL conference. It was really, really a lot of fun. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, let us know when you're down here. We'd love to treat you to some dinner or breakfast or something.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right, Lee. Thank you so much. We'll talk so soon.
Yep. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.